Yeah, we got a lot to talk about this episode. Definitely some more of the same, but definitely want to hear how you're feeling now that the ordinal dams are flooding, people trying to jump on in, people rotating in and out into shit coins. How does that affect us? And so much more. But glad you're doing well on this Tuesday and excited to fire up some ordinals with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say like if we go back to last week for like just 1 minute. Um, Bitcoin hit 69,000. Then we like dropped 10K to 59, kind of recovered to like 62, 63. Ordinals were ripping. You asked me like, was I doing anything different? Told you I was doing the same thing, and that's how I feel about today and this past week. Even though I think like Ordinals have kind of calmed down a bit, and Bitcoin shot up, I'm kind of still like on the same path, doing the same thing. I'm not going to change. As long as we're in a bull cycle, I'm going to continue to be bullish.
Dude, I absolutely love it. I have definitely some stuff to report out on my end. I've been doing the same as well, but I took my first big ordinals oofy. So I definitely want to talk about that and talk out some things to look out for on the downside for ordinals. In terms of the bullish thesis, it's still very much there. And both you and I, WAF, were around during the ETH bull run back in 2021, 2022. And I mean, pullbacks are par for the course, you know? There's a lot of stuff that we really are early. And I know that that's like such a cliche in this space, like, "Oh, we're so early, we're all gonna make it." But genuinely, just think about how many people are just now banging the drum on, like, "It's time to buy Bitcoin, it's time to buy Bitcoin." And there were people who were doing the same thing with Ethereum before NFTs even came onto the scene. And even after so many people just had huge bags of Bored Apes and art blocks back in the day, you know, those sold off a decent bit and then just came back in full force after tax season in 2022 to an amazing effect. So keep in mind it was tax season. Bitcoin was ripping to all time highs. So it's not surprising to see a little bit of pullback in ordinals. But I mean, the barrier to entry for the average person to even go about buying one of these things or even knowing that they exist and knowing why they're going to be big is still so high. So, I mean, I think it would be crazy to be selling off on these dips, at least on some of these established collections. So, I'm right there with you, Af. So bullish.
Yeah, totally agree with everything you said. I do remember that ETH run, where everything seemed to be going down like right into the new year, and then 2022 everything just ripped like crazy. I remember that. That was, and I think we're going to see something similar to that in Bitcoin too, where we have this breather now in the ordinal space, since like we're mostly focused on ordinals. But if you go back like 1 month ago, this bottom that we're at now, and I do think we've hit sort of like a, call it an interim bottom. We're at much higher prices than like 30 days ago. I mean, if you look at node monkeys, we were probably at like 0.15. Now we're still at like a little bit over a half a Bitcoin. Nat cats were like brand new, so so it almost like doesn't count for them. But the puppets were probably like in the '05 to '07 range, and they're still at like 0.16 when I last checked. So things have come down, but these are good entry prices, I think, for the next leg up.
Yeah, man. I totally agree. I mean, really does like stuff has to go through consolidation periods. And especially with Bitcoin ripping, a lot of the US dollar equivalents stay the same. I'm not even worried ever about the day-to-day price of Bitcoin. I think my goal with trading ordinals is to stack Bitcoin. I think that's just how you have to approach it. I think if you get too phased out by, okay, here's the dollar amount of my account today versus the dollar amount in the future, you might just like spread yourself too thin. At least for trading NFTs, I think the goal is you just need to stack up whatever the underlying currency is. So if it's Solana, ETH, Bitcoin, doesn't really matter. Your goal should just be to stack it. So with stuff pulling back here, it definitely seems like there's a good opportunity to get some multiples on your Bitcoin and just generate more Bitcoin. I think trying to do both at the same time is a little bit detrimental to your trading game.
Yeah, I was talking to Remy earlier today, and it was like, what? If you could buy like three node monkeys around this price right now, like in a week or two, you probably could sell two of them and like keep one for free. I mean, I think there's like those kind of opportunities out there where just buy the low, and just create more Bitcoin for yourself, or create more ordinals for yourself at a lower price. If you buy multiples, you probably could pay them off with the purchase, knowing it in advance. So what you're gonna do, have a game plan. It should work out. I really think it should work out pretty easy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think we still see that the top collections are still on top. So I think it's going to be one of those things where just buying the dips is going to pay off tremendously. And I'm glad you shouted out Node Monkeys because that's just one of those things that once the money gets freed off from Merlin, I'm really going to try to snag one of those if there's a good price point or if I can, flip some ordinals in the interim. Just stuff that has that narrative of collection with staying power is so appealing when ordinals are still, picking up volume and people are still onboarding onto them. Node Monkeys being the accepted first PFP collection, 10K PFP on ordinals, it is really hard to fade that. I think that's just such a good opportunity. We've seen it with the crypto punks. We've seen with early stuff like Bored Apes when people adopt it, it just goes crazy. So I definitely think Node Monkeys are just one of the most appealing collections on that pullback. They are obviously a high entry, but you can look at other stuff that's just cemented a spot in the space, like Puppets definitely pulling back. Nat Cat's obviously been banging the drum since episode one here. It's the highest conviction of something I can have in the space. Um, I do want to talk to you though, Waf. What are your thoughts on all of these NAT derivatives that are coming out? I mean, we've just seen like 30, 40, 50 NAT projects come out. Most of them just go straight to zero. Is this bullish on NAT because people are adopting the protocol, or is it bearish just because so many of these have been forced out and we haven't really seen too much stick yet?
Okay, I'll answer you the last question first. On DMT and the NAT collections, I would say it's generally bullish, not these particular collections that have come out, because there's probably got to be a way to kind of, I guess, gate the deployment of these projects so that you don't have a few holders like mint out the whole collection and tank the whole thing. So if they could find a way to kind of better distribute sort of like the mint process and like figure that out somehow, um, then I think it's gonna be like the way to go moving forward. That's how I view sort of like the DMT NAT space. On your point to Node Monkey too, I just want to say I think like 1 Bitcoin seems like a fair price for Node Monkey. I think like they're definitely gonna go to 1 Bitcoin, no matter the price of Bitcoin. It just feels like it's programmed. It is sort of like the preeminent collection in my mind as well. It just feels like the Bored Ape yacht clubs of Bitcoin. I feel like 1 Bitcoin is programmed on Node Monkeys.
Dude, I totally agree, and I like your point as to the price doesn't really matter. Like, I think it gets to that point where we will reach peak euphoria at some point during this bull run, and the price just goes out the window. I mean, I remember when ETH initially ripped up to the 3Ks and maybe the 4Ks, people were like, "Oh, punks can't keep running, bored apes can't keep running." They were destined for 100 ETH, right? It didn't really matter what the price point was. I mean, those were going for hundreds of thousands of dollars at their peak, not to send PSD to anyone who has apes or has had apes, but like the price point that these could actually reach are just crazy because we've seen it before and somehow the stars aligned. I thought maybe it wouldn't happen because the macro conditions and the broader market, talking like classic stock exchange stuff, maybe wasn't as hot as it was back then. Red hot. Stock market's at all-time highs. There's a lot of extra money circulating around, and just the biggest catalyst, in my opinion, is still that Bitcoin ETF approval. You're going to have old money coming in, buying up Bitcoin. A lot of that is going to be flowing throughout all of crypto. So there's just catalysts that make me think we're going to continue to see money flow. And then once the collections continue to take off, sky's still the limit, right? I think people who are afraid of like, oh man, Node Runnies, he's can't go any higher. How could it possibly be worth 100K? Seen it before. There's nothing that's saying we can't see it again. So I'm with you, Af. I think one Bitcoin easily obtainable.
Udi, the founder of Taproot Wizards, he had a tweet, I want to say maybe last week, where he mentioned sort of like the unit bias of Bitcoin, where he didn't think that people would like there's not enough bitcoins like in circulation, like you should have made, like Satoshi should have made it sort of like a bigger size, and as a result of that people tend to go to coins and currencies that they could accumulate a lot of. And but then he did mention like runes would kind of fix that, and then these bitcoin ancient whales, as he likes to call them, they have like thousands and thousands of bitcoin, and when they see ordinals and things in the collection that they want, and it costs them 2 or 3 Bitcoin or 4 or 5 Bitcoin, like it doesn't even matter to them if it's like the best ordinal that they can get and it's a flex, then they're just gonna spend the 4 or 5 Bitcoin on it because they have thousands of Bitcoin and like the nominal value, like in terms of dollars, like simply does not matter.
Yeah, it's always that, abstraction of price reality, I think is such a big thing. And we've seen that just across crypto. I mean, it's crazy the amount of money that people have spent on these collections in the past, on memes, on just silly things. I mean, even right now with shitcoins running, right? It's crazy that the market cap of these is larger than fully fledged companies that exist in the world. But it doesn't even matter. Like, that's just here. That's what people are buying. And to your point, if you're a whale that got in at Bitcoin when it was less than a dollar or, tens of dollars and you have thousands or hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, could care less if you're spending 2 or 3, but that's still setting that price history that people can go back to and saying, "Well, someone paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for it, so that's what it's worth." That's always been the name of the game in this space, and when you're dealing with collections of only thousands of items, I mean, that's it. Like the floors can move quickly, so I definitely think that that price discovery will definitely come in once those ancient whales get a little bit more active here.
Yeah, and I would just say like on like the market now, I did notice a lot of people kind of capitulating and people who bought like even just a week ago, like selling at like big losses. So like that sign, that's an indicator for me that like we've kind of bottomed where people are taking losses. Like so, like everyone's not sitting in profit. When everyone's sitting in profit, then there's that potential for profit taking. I think that's already happened. People taking losses now. I think kind of we found our bottom and we kind of just start grinding our way higher to the next high. I mean, these are some great prices out there right now. Whether it's Bitcoin frogs at like 0.14, um, honestly, even like OMB has like this big upcoming mint coming up, and like they've come down at least like half a Bitcoin by now too. So there's just a lot of opportunities out there. I would say ultimately the end you got to degen responsibly. Like just don't get too overexposed, remain liquid for just opportunities that that come up that are not like that are not foreseen like right now. So you can take advantage of them, and I think you'll be all right at the end. I think just stay the path and stay the course, and everything should be good.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do want to circle back to something that you brought up, which is in terms of Nat collections trying to get the distribution a little bit more even and preventing it from people just minting them to shit. That was the first Ufi that I alluded to earlier that I took in the ordinal space. Is there was these Natalias that came out, I think like the day after we did our last week's episode. And I'm definitely looking for generative art with Nat. I definitely thought that the possibilities for generative art would be there. And I think I overthought myself and bought into the FOMO a little bit. They definitely kind of had a Fidenza derivative feel to them, but they were trading over the counter, very similar to Nat Cats. It was about like zero point zero 0.06 at the time that I bought in. I think a few other people in MVHQ were buying into them, and I just thought it was going to be a no-brainer. Same thing with Nat Cats, barrier to entry buying over the counter. They'd go live, and the price would shoot up. But it's the opposite effect. When they went live on Magic Eden, there was 2,000 in the collection, and there was like barely 300 holders to 2,000 NFTs. So you're looking at a 1 to 6.5 holder ratio, which is just pretty bad. It's definitely hard to know the true holder counts of any of these collections, puppets, node monkeys, whatever, because people are going to distribute their stuff across multiple wallets. So hard to say what a good standard of an actual holder count looks like. Specifically for these Nats and specifically for that project Natalia's, I kind of got a sense that there was some grifter nonsense going on where whoever created the project clued in a few people, then had those people just mint the shit out of the project and then try to, trade over the counter and lure in buyers ahead of time. So ended up taking a pretty big oofy there because I bought a lot of them over the counter thinking it was going to go up. And I mean, those things just dumped. So lesson learned. I definitely think it's still just stick with the conviction, stay the course. There was really nothing about Natalia's that was that exciting. I just liked the art, and I think definitely wanted more of that Nat narrative. Should have just bought Nat Cats instead, since that's just a clear conviction. They're the first Nat project, no brainer. But I wanted to bring that up to you, WAF, as well as the audience. Just be on the lookout for these projects where people are minting them heavily ahead of time, because that unequal holder distribution can definitely mean, poor performance, at least in the short to medium term.
The other thing I would add to that is on the all the NAT related stuff, like, now people are like monitoring mints and just kind of like going in without knowing too much of what it is, what it's about. And so like now I'm looking for socials on stuff like that. Like if there's not like socials on a project and it's just sort of like here's the mint and there's about like some FOMO kind of concerning it, like I don't want to have a part of it. I just think like those things are going to zero pretty much right away. They're like probably like derivatives at this point. So like I need to see, like, it needs to be better than that, I think. And whether it's the distribution or having like some socials and like a legit project like backing it and behind it, that's what I'm going to be looking for going forward on anything like DMT NAT related until this distribution kind of gets figured out a bit. And I think distribution will be better because like people have their eyes on it now. And like again, like you have like in the Luminex Discord, you could like monitor DMT mints. I think Ord Watches now has like a tap mints tab too. So like, I do think distribution will be better because there's more eyes on it. But again, I think the project needs to have socials and needs to have something like more substantive behind it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, and I mean, I remember back in the ETH days, definitely stealth drops were a big thing. But I think even before the stealth drop phase, we had the curated minting phase, right? Where it was gonna be a time and a place, and you'd have gas wars that would settle a lot of it, but it was sort of that great equalizer. I think now you're definitely seeing more like allow list and whitelist spots going out to premier collections in the space. So like Node Monkeys. I know recently there was that RuneX drop that went to cat holders, and I think RSIC holders got some of those as well. Oh, I definitely think as you see more airdrops go to premier communities, it's going to help with that distribution, like you're saying, and move away from sort of just the stealth stuff where maybe people weren't as tuned in, and some of the people who've just been around the block earlier can get in, and they're so cheap to mint they can just get 30% of the supply off the jump.
Yeah, like and like to your point about airdrops, this is something I've been thinking about too. Like I have most of my ordinals kind of condensed among like 2, 3 wallets, but like this airdrop meta on Bitcoin is real, and I think like I'm probably doing myself a little bit of a disservice not like spreading it out across more wallets. Because like puppets usually get like some type of airdrop, Node Monkeys, Natcats, like you could easily distribute like these across many wallets and like really take advantage of add drops, especially when these add drops are not like stackable and they're like limited to like one per wallet, maybe max two. Um, so like if you have multiple of a collection, you probably got to start considering really just kind of having one in each wallet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes really well with your strategy for Merlin Seal. I've just been creating extra wallets on Unisat. It's pretty easy to do that. You just kind of add the wallet and it's all still there from one extension. You don't have to go through like creating different profiles or anything, which I think is nice. So, I mean, just doing that. And then when you're sending Bitcoin over, you can also just take the time, send a Natcat or whatever your, ordinal of choice is over to those wallet. But it makes sense to have it spread out at the end of the day. It's obviously a little bit more clicking around, but some of these airdrops we've seen, like I think RuneX at its peak yesterday was worth like $1,400. So that's just a free $1,400. You might as well take the chance of catching as much of that as you can.
Yeah, like I got two of them, and like if the R6 were kind of like available to get that drop as well as Natcats, like I could have easily gotten like 50 of those things and I didn't. So like it's a kind of like a lesson learned. Like I need to like distribute my stuff across a bunch of wallets. What do you
Yeah,
think about? Sorry, good.
oh, all you.
I was gonna say like there was like a lot of pretty like hot hype mints like this week. Did you get in on any of them? What you think of them? Like for example, the Apostles of Greed is Orange Eyes was one of them that I know it's like pretty hyped. The Meat Can Mint coming up, I believe tomorrow. Um, there was like Hood and Nose Mint. I mean, there was quite a few. I feel like this week, and there's still like a few more coming up. I think even the cock list is also this week, right?
Yeah, a lot of stuff coming up. Definitely been stuff that I've been watching on the radar. I haven't gone for it. I'm still just like, I don't know. I've never been a big fan of having to grind for whitelists or allow lists. I think the only mint that's really on my radar is Inked on Bitcoin at this point, and then the Leonidas rune drops. I definitely want to pin Leonidas because I want to circle back and ask you a little bit more about runes and your thoughts on differentiating the collections that are coming out. But for any of those projects, if I didn't have whitelist or allow list, I wasn't really going for it. I definitely am going to be curious to see how these derivative collections come out. So with the Apostles of Greed, the Orange Eyes, I'm just not really sure what the thesis is there, just because I'm not super familiar with the OG collection. But I'm really curious what the orange eyes are going to look like. I'm sure for OMB, the orange eyes are going to be a cook. It is crazy that they have such a high mint price. Obviously, the orange eyes is kind of just like a meme in the ordinal space, and where there's memes, there's staying power. So I think those should do well, but like that is just a crazy high mint price for essentially a derivative or a companion collection to your main collection. So I'm not really sure how these collections are going to play out. So I've just been watching and learning. As far as cock lists, it just seems like there's a ton of supply for that. I also think the art is kind of just like bad. I know they're supposed to be cocks, so it's like funny, but it just didn't really appeal to me. I think my plan with ordinals is just try to fade the edges and just really fixate on the high conviction plays. So I was really convicted on puppets for a long time. I still am, but I think they just like already had such a nice success and got to a really high price point where I felt comfortable offloading. So I've just been glued to Nat Cats at this point. I mean, the fact that they're below zero point zero 0.06, I've just like pretty much just been putting all my liquidity in there. And then if they keep going lower, I'm like, all right, I'll just keep adding more liquidity and buying Nat Cats. So that's kind of been my grind the last week.
That's funny because I've had to like physically hold myself back from buying more Nat Cats because I saw a low of even like 0.049 this morning. I'm like, this is crazy. And I didn't pull the trigger on it. I was like, you know what, I got enough. I'm just gonna like hold pat and just like wait for price to kind of climb back up, which it's moved back up. I think it's like a little bit over zero point zero 0.06 right now. Um, on the Apostles of Greed, Orange Eyes, like I think they came out yesterday. Um, they look all right. I guess I don't really know the thesis behind it either. I thought maybe they could be like a secondary play on it. I've been watching the price; it hasn't really done that much. On O and B Orange Eyes, I would say like congratulations to the mentors because like that one is kind of like a true way to like reward your previous holders. But I also don't think you're incentivizing anything for the new holders. So like those holders who have like multiple who can mint, I guess 4 or 13 even. Like I just expect a massive dump after the mint. I mean, I think public price is like almost like one Bitcoin. It's like 0.99. So, and I know they're saying like it's probably won't even get to public. I don't think it would. I don't think anyone would mint that for 0.99 when you could just buy I guess like the OG collection right now for like 1.25. So who's gonna buy it public? And then I think the higher end whitelist or allow list price is like 0.29. So I maybe it hovers around there after mint, but then I would expect it to go lower after that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And that's where I'm just really interested in sort of seeing these dynamics play out. And if there's anyone listening who has an OMB or is a little bit more tied into the community, feel free. I know there's a really big narrative and lore behind OMB. So there's a lot of reason why people are in that community and are excited to be there. OMBs are just one of the most successful ordinals projects right now. So I definitely could see this akin to the first companion drop, like we saw, Bored Apes back in the day get the Mutant Apes, and Azuki's got Elementals. So just curious to see like how is this going to play out. But to your point, I just don't really think it's sustainable for making profit. I can't imagine them opening up and then with that secondary tier mint for non OMB holders at 0.29. If you're already spending 0.29, you have to have a lot of liquidity on hand to the point where like if that's your bankroll size and that's just one purchase, maybe it would make more sense to just get the main OMB collection unless the orange eyes just look so sick that people have them and then they catch up. But given how much OMBs have already risen just because their mint was announced, like I think after it was announced, it shot up from like zero point 0.8 to 1.5 or 1.6 at the peak. It'll be really interesting to see if OMB capitulates a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see how the orange eyes do. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if people buy that early, and then we see a little bit of a instant flush after the mint. But I think there's definitely good plays there. Like if you're glued to the price action, I'm sure you could find a bottom in orange eyes and make a little profit if you're fast.
Oh yeah, I definitely think you can play that and trade it. But I don't, to be honest with you, I don't care how awesome the orange eyes looks. Like it's not gonna beat the OG collection. So I would expect the price to be like significantly lower. But like again, I think if you're in OMB already, like it, then congratulations. That's a big win.
Yeah, it's not free for OMB holders, right? It's still 0.09, or am I mistaken there?
No, no, I think you're right. It is 0.09, but I mean, like that's significantly like cheaper than the 0.29. I feel like in the secondary is going to probably wind up somewhere in the middle, right? I do. So I don't like mint prices that have that type of like disparity between them, where I don't think it's going to climb past the I guess the allow list price. I'm not even sure how they did the allow list, to be honest. So you mint for 0.29, and like holders got it at 0.09, and there's holders who have multiple. I just feel like you're gonna get dumped on.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, and I think it's just a weird mechanic. Like, I think would have made sense if holders just got it for free, and then the public was a little bit higher. And I think that could have incentivized the price action. Like I think if it was a point 0.1 or even a 0.15 mint, and OMB holders got it completely free, I think then you might have seen it go up to like 0.25, point 0.3. But the way that they're pricing it as just like even the holders are paying close to point 0.1 Bitcoin, and then you have the public paying triple that. It just almost makes it like inevitably meeting in the middle. People who mint off the bat, I'm sure they'll sell it for their quick guaranteed point 0.1 or point 0.2. But I definitely think that we're going to see some people get burned there if they mint on public for point 0.3. I can't imagine it opening up at like point 0.4, point 0.5. Maybe, you never know with ordinals, but that was definitely an interesting pricing structure.
Yeah, I mean, I think these OMB holders are typically diamond handed too. So like because they had a similar structure in their second mint with the green eyes, because I think there was like kind of like a smaller collection of green eyes, and then they expanded it, and there was like the similar pricing structure. So over the long term, it'll probably work out, but in the short term, I just don't think you could do better in terms of price in the short term. Is what I would say.
Yeah, that's definitely a great shout. If, OMB holders are definitely very diamond handed. So as those continue to do well, the companion collection will rise as well. I think usually we've seen like 1 to 10 is usually the price ratio that we see. So like mutant apes are usually worth a tenth of what Bitcoin, or sorry, the board apes are worth. I think as the floors get a little bit closer, it can range from like 1 to 10 to 1 to 5. So I'm sure we'll see a price ratio, and then that'll just hold. So if in the future OMBs end up being a 5 Bitcoin collection, it's definitely possible the orange eyes could be worth 1 Bitcoin themselves. So I definitely think it's still a good entry into that ecosystem if you've been looking to get into OMBs, and hopefully you can get access to their Discord and their holders chat. But definitely just be careful buying any tops as that mint happens. You could probably get a nice entry if you're patient.
Yeah. So what do you think of the Mikan mint tomorrow as well?
I don't know if I've seen them, honestly. Do you have links to them?
I can send you later. Or maybe someone could drop it in chat, but it's like a female anime art collection, or PFP, I should
Oh,
say.
oh,
Not,
oh,
not.
oh, okay. I didn't even realize that's how that was pronounced. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
maybe I'm wrong on how you pronounce it.
No, no, no. I think you're right. I was thinking like Mike Can or like Mikan. So I was like, oh, meat can. And I was thinking you were saying meat can. And I was just like, oh, there's going to be meat cans. Yeah. I think it's going to be an interesting mint to watch. It's sort of the same thing last week when we talked about Inked on Bitcoin. I think ton of the projects that we've seen that have come out so far are just like shitty pixel art, and I think you can owe a lot of that to just how expensive it can be to inscribe traits before collections. Like, it's definitely a lot more expensive to drop a collection on Bitcoin than it is on Solana or ETH. So I think this is one that's going to have higher quality artwork than we've seen before. It's definitely interesting that they're front running the Inked on Bitcoin mint a little bit, because I think that's sort of like the big anime PFP that people have their eyes on. But I think it'll do well. I definitely think if you can mint those early on and you got access to allow it, it should for sure be a cook. And I think hopefully it'll bring a little bit more life back into the Ordinals market. So that'll be a really good one to watch. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely rooting for it. I would say I'm probably not like super bullish on it, or probably like a lukewarm bullish on it, but I am rooting for it and hopefully it will do well. I do have a whitelist on it too, so I will mint mine, and then I also have a claim through Ordinals codes. So yeah, I'm hoping they'll do well, but I'm not really expecting like it to be anything like a blue chip or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I definitely don't think it's there about I don't think it's going to be a blue chip status either, but I think it's just one of those projects like midterm. It has some success, I mean, we've seen like a ton of projects after Azuki that got the spotlight briefly. There was Asuna, there was My Killer Girlfriend. There's lots of other ones that I don't even remember the names of, but those all briefly held like multiple ETH floors. So I especially think for this, maybe they're hot for a day. We actually saw someone that was like briefly hot the other day. What was they called? It was like a 333 collection. Let me pull that up. I don't remember off the top of my head.
These have like a mint price, I want to say, of maybe 0.008 or something like that. Maybe I'm mistaken. So I guess I'm curious, like, where do you see like the floor on these, like after they mint out? Like, what do you think is like kind of like the top on these?
I'd say the top is probably point 0.1. Okay, this is the mint I was thinking of. So the collection came out last week. It was called Bangers, and there was 333 of them. It was 100%, OMB inspired. It was just sort of like crudely drawn PFPs, a little bit better art than OMBs, but obviously they're not like as degen as the OMBs. Like I think the OMBs sort of take pride in the shitty artwork, and they're all one of one. So this was similar. I think those were hot off the gate. It was just a war to get them because there's such a small supply and pretty good distribution. I think those shot up to like 0.12 after mint, and now they're chilling at 0.028. And that was a pretty good collection with small sizing. So, given the mint price of the Mecans tomorrow, I mean, honestly, I think they might even just top out at like 0.07. If they get to that, that's a big if. I wouldn't like buy with that price target in mind, but think you're going to see them having a hard time going above point 0.1, to be honest, because I just think like if they are going to get there, the art is going to have to reveal. It's going to have to be really good art, and then you're going to have to see genuine people who are influential in ordinals gravitating towards them and saying, "I love this project. This one speaks to me." Repping them as PFPs. You can see all that happen. That would allow it to break point 0.1, but I think you're going to need to see all that to get some serious traction.
Yeah, my gut instinct is to like kind of is like similar to your thoughts. Like I think it could probably run up to a point oh 0.05, 0.06, 0.07, but then ultimately we'll look back at it in a week or two and it'll be sitting there like the bangers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you know, this is an interesting just conversation about NFTs in general. This is something that I talk to Poopa Loopa about a lot. Is even though we've seen this shift into NFTs, like these projects are just so young, and unless there's something that's influential about them, if people didn't want them before, it's not like they're just magically going to want them now. And not to cross chain here, but with the blast drop, there was so many high expectations for these projects that were coming out, and it was like, oh, this one's coming out and this is Wolf Game on Blast, but projects didn't exist prior to Blast. So just because it's on a new network doesn't mean people are going to magically care about them. So while I do think the ordinals hype is hot, and like that means people are going to naturally degen into more stuff because they're trying to capture that next 100x that's coming out the pipeline, most of the projects are still going to go to zero because there's nothing special or influential about them. So unless you're targeting something that has a clear narrative of this is historic to Bitcoin, this is relevant to ordinals, this is influential because of this reason, I think those projects in general, you should always trade with short-term time frames.
Yeah, that's why FUD equals moon, right? Like when projects come out without like expectations and they could kind of like slowly build up and gather some steam that way, they tend to do well. But when you're coming out from the gate and the expectations are set so high already, all you could do is really disappoint. I mean, you could definitely still meet expectations, but for the most, you're more likely to disappoint than to like deliver. I mean, it's almost like you mentioned Poop, and like obviously Poop is in the DFS world and he's in the fantasy world. Like it's like a prospect who's highly touted and he's like a bust in year one as a rookie, and then people write him off, and then year two he comes in and he explodes. I feel like that's kind of like a similar analogy I would make to like some of these collections. Like you come in like people expecting hot things, and it just doesn't work out that way. Or sometimes when you have no expectations, it tends to work out better. So it's just kind of like one of those things where even if ultimately you do meet expectations, it's not like a straight line up in terms of like floor price or anything like that. Like you're gonna have like severe dips and pullbacks, and then maybe you like grind up a little bit later. I mean, that's kind of how I see these collections.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I know I bring up the same projects every week and I definitely talk about puppets a lot, but I definitely think it makes sense to talk about the industry leaders. When you're looking at use cases and stuff about successful companies and other companies that model after them, pick these successful companies over and over and over again because they were successful. So, talking about the expectations and the promises, puppets did none of that. They came out the gate and were like, this is just an art project. And it really was that organic community of people that were like, we just like these, they're funny. It had just such a good thesis and antithesis to everything else in the space. And that's why it became noteworthy. Out the gate, they sat at a sub zero point zero 0.01 floor for a while. It's not like they just came out and immediately got all this traction and that hype. Oh, that's where I think you have to be really careful in this space because these ordinals do fetch such crazy prices, and like you can very quickly buy a collection at 0.01 and then have it go to zero and you're down a grand before you even notice. Like, I mean, just to put that in comparison, like a month or two ago, we were trading Solana PFPs, and if something went to 20 Solana, we were losing our minds here. And that was 2 grand at the time, maybe $1,200, depending on the time frame and the price of that, soul chart. But we were going crazy if something went to 20 Sol. That's like 0.02 Bitcoin. So when you see this shit and it's opening up at 0.03, 0.05, like please take pause and just ask yourself, like, how can this already be here at the opening day? Is it warranted or is it fabricated? And like that's I think the biggest thing you got to keep in mind when you're playing this game. Because otherwise, like it's so easy for those influencers to keep it hot for 2 days and then it just fades away. Like you don't want to be buying into that stuff.
Yeah, if you think about like the past week, we had a pretty hot degen collection that came out there. It was like Node Apes. I don't know if you got in on Node Apes. I faded Node Apes because I got into like Node Dogs that kind of went to zero a couple of weeks ago. So I usually every once a week I have a pretty much a bad play. So like 2 weeks ago was Node Dogs. This past week was Node Cats. So I figured, oh, I missed Node Apes. Let me get in on Node Cats, and like that one went straight to zero. So like you're right. You got to be careful. You think you're taking like a chance with a little bit of Bitcoin, but point oh 0.01 and point oh 0.02 like that adds up quick if you lose that a few times.
Yeah, and I do think it's like there's just so much momentum that plays into those smaller collections. Like, will those collections do well if everything pumps? Yes. Like, that's what we've seen established with Ethereum and Solana. There's just going to be pockets where the market is red hot. And because of that, new money's coming in. And when new money comes in, everything gets bought up. So, we saw a couple weeks ago with Ordinals, everything was pumping. I know you and I talked about Puppet MaxiBiz, PMB. I think you said there was definitely a play for a quick flip. I personally just said, yeah, I got my two that I minted. I sold them out. I didn't want back in because I just don't really ever believe in derivatives. That's kind of my stance across different collections. If something is just genuinely a knockoff of another collection, maybe it will do well in that scenario where the market's red hot and the money flows into it. But like than just a sympathy play where people are like, shit, I can't afford a node monkey, but I really want in. Yeah, in that scenario, the Node Apes absolutely could have done well. But because Node Monkeys themselves fell like 50% over the last 2 weeks, um, there really was no reason I think that that would do well long term. I know they did pump up to like 0.01, and that's maybe FOMO for people where they're like, well, shit, these might go to 0.05, zero point 0.1, but like you just don't want to get into those collections, at least in my opinion, because the floor is just nothing. It's a derivative collection. It doesn't stand on anything. It's not endorsed by the main collection. So just buying into something that, in my mind, is designed to go to zero. I think, yes, you can always make quick flips on anything in this space. To your point, Waf, I know you got a good entry on those and I hope flipped out of some of those PMBs. But that's just a quick flip in my mind. It's never a long term hold.
You're absolutely right on that. I would say, unfortunately, I'm still bag holding those, but so it's like a lesson learned for me. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know what I'm looking for? I'm looking for volume, like sustained volume, and like the collections that have the sustained volume are the ones that honestly that we've been talking about. They're node monkeys, they're the puppets, the quantum cats, the RSIC, Meta Protocol, OMBs, Nat cats, the Bitcoin frogs, even although they're probably a little bit less. So like you need that sustained volume. Like some of these collections come out of nowhere, and they kind of capture the volume for one day, and then they go away, and then no longer like on the top 10 in volume. So I think you just need to focus on these other collections because once the volume disappears, then the floor price is gonna just be gone. It's gonna go to zero, just like you said.
Yeah, and that's where the paper handlers come in, I mean, we trade pretty liquid assets every day. I love the shout out for volume there. It's always just so significant. Like, truly, if you see something that's a blip on the radar for a day, keep a tab on it, but just keep in mind your bankroll and your risk tolerance. I think in any space that we've been trading, be it Solana, Ethereum, meme coins, whatever, stuff that does well, it's on the leaderboard for weeks in a row. I remember back in Ethereum, that was just a big test for me is okay, I saw this thing at 0.05, now it's at point 0.1, now it's at 0.13. Like I just keep seeing it. I keep seeing it. Like the fact that it's been around for 3 weeks and it hasn't disappeared yet, maybe there's something here. And then I dig a little bit deeper. So I definitely encourage because I know a decent amount of the people listening into, our show, they still really haven't onboarded into ordinals. And I understand it's like a steep entry to get into this space, but take this time now when things are a little bit slower, when the floors are beaten down. Like, this is still a great buying opportunity. It's never financial advice, just to reiterate, but I think it's truly a good opportunity when floors are down 50%. I've talked lots on here and in voice chat just about the power of buying dips. Some of these collections are down 50%. So there's a pretty good opportunity to double up if those return back to their highs, which I think they will. Like it's still early. So I would just be using this time to research the stuff that still does have volume and will be around in weeks from now.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, like I know that we have a lot of puppet fans, so I think puppets are definitely on a low. Still kind of expensive and pricey. I mean, probably like out of these collections that I have the most conviction on, that are at lower entry prices would be Natcats. I mean, at 0.063, like we were just at like 0.12 last week. So like again, it's like a 50% discount. I think that's a good entry to just buy and hold. Even if you're just gonna trade it, I think eventually it's gonna rise in price. You just naturally because we're closer to the bottom than we are the top. I feel like that one's a good one. But the rest of really, they're holding pretty strong. Like Quantum Cats, 0.32. That's not really like cheap, So like you're still paying in to get into the collection. So I would feel confident getting into any of I'll say like the top tier collections, and then just sort of like pull back on the derivative place and the
Yeah,
degen
definitely.
mints.
I definitely bought it. I mean, you can get a cheap degen mint. You never know because, like, even though I did get that oofy with Natalia's, if you were someone who minted those, you had a window of making zero point zero 0.05 Bitcoin for every sale that you had. And same thing with those Node apes. Those were like basically free to mint, and you had a good chance to make zero point zero 0.01 from it. So, like, there's going to be plays that are out there. It just is a matter of, are you someone who sprays and prays? Are you someone who buys the dip? Like, I think in anything you trade, you should just go into it with a strategy of how are you going to approach it, and then find those things that allow you to um, collections that will allow you to synergize with your trading style. And it's different for everybody. There's some people who are just like, they want to mint everything, then like go mint everything, mint everything and you'll have some big winners for sure. And just figure out how are you going to find the things that are going to go straight to zero and not mint that. And if you're someone who only buys the best collections that are out there, blue chip only, amazing. How are you going to time that? Like, what is your entry into the bottom going to look like? Do you know if it's right now during this episode? Do you know if that's a week from now? Like, just have a strategy in mind that you like, and then find the collections that suit you. I think with ordinals, there's not really a right or wrong way to do it. It's just a matter of like being tuned into the space and knowing like when is your time to take your shot.
Yeah, let me clarify. Like on the degen mints, I think it's more than okay to mint them because they're low cost, they're low risk. It's playing them on secondary that could be dangerous, right? Like if they gain speed and you're trying to like just scoop them up when you see a bunch pending, but once like people stop buying them, you might be stuck with them. So I think playing the degen mints on secondary is quite a bit dangerous, but minting them is actually pretty risk free. I would say it's a pretty low risk type of move to just mint.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, yeah. Great clarification there. And absolutely, I think there's still going to be plenty of 100 and 1000 X's to be minted here. I've never been great at the degen mint game myself, but I usually try to like if you're gonna buy secondary, wait for a pullback or at least do some research into secondary and like shout out to Loop for this advice. He's told me before. It's like if something's gonna go up to a Bitcoin, of plenty of chances to buy it on the journey, right? It's not gonna open up and go straight to 1 Bitcoin overnight. Maybe you'll miss a little bit of the profit straight after mint until it can establish itself a little bit. But if you're patient, you do your research, like if there's a collection that's worth getting that's going to go on that moon mission, like you'll know about it before it reaches the moon. Like you'll have plenty of time to join in.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, nothing goes up in a straight line.
Absolutely. I do want to field this question from Nustra. Have you seen the Orange Royal Tomb? I have. If you want to unmute Nustra, if you want to tell us a little bit more about it, I just remember it was like a super HD picture that was being minted, and the inscription cost was crazy. And I think you might have gotten one airdrop to you randomly. Know if that was real or fake or what was good with those, but that's all I know about him is that it was just like something that looked good by some artist. And there was a mint for it, but they were expensive. So if you have any additional details, would love to have you up and talk about
I'm just catching up to chat. Is this true? You're raffling off 7 NatCats?
it.
Do we have any questions out there from anybody? Curious, like how other people feel and what their take is on the market. If anybody wants to, get on stage and if you have any differences in opinion or you see it the same way, it'd be like kind of interesting to hear like what other people are thinking. We're not getting Jinzo, we're not getting Seinfeld, we're not getting anybody.
What up?
We
What
got
up? How are you?
What's up? What's up?
I've been
Uh,
summoned.
what's up,
You've been
Seinfeld? You go ahead, buddy.
No, no, go for it, Jinzo. I just heard
I
my
wasn't
name and
gonna say much. Yeah, I was gonna say basically, I don't know where we're going, man. Bitcoin could just keep ripping, and then ordinals will just coast forever. So, what do you really want to do, right? You want to keep accumulating ordinals on this dump? I mean, you can if you have spare ETH, but I mean, Bitcoin. But I'm always so afraid that Bitcoin keeps ripping and ripping, and then we're just stuck losing money or stuck losing Bitcoin basically because the whole point of this game is to stack Bitcoin, right? So I feel like I'll just keep doing what I've always been doing is selling on pumps and trying to stack Bitcoin, put it on the side and still stay involved in ordinals, maybe have my couple long-term holds, but I'll flip it the volume as much as I can because as we saw with this week, I mean, the dumps can be pretty brutal sometimes. I mean, we're still much higher than we were a couple weeks ago. Like, I mean, for those of us that have been around, I mean, this is still a very good floor for a lot of these projects. I'm still very happy, but you're missing out on so much profit by staying invested. Like you said, ETH happened for a year or two, everything just started crashing. So I don't know, man. I just want to stay liquid. I think this whole bull run.
That's a very fair point, Jinzo. Like even last week, I was saying at any point in crypto, like you could expect to like lose 20% of your portfolio value like in an instant, and that's just with crypto. So when you're talking about ordinals, I mean, you could probably bump that price up to 50%, right? And so to your point, you could be losing money when Bitcoin is price is rising, and just some of the things I've heard this past week with like Bitcoin breaks all time highs, it tends to double within like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So could you imagine? And it sounds absolutely nuts and crazy. Could you imagine $140,000 Bitcoin price in like 30 days? Like that would be insane.
It would. It's not impossible at all. I mean, it's just been an insane meteoric rise. It can happen, and it's going to happen sooner than people think, right? I mean, the rest of the market's going to have to catch up eventually, but it doesn't mean Bitcoin has to fall for the rest to catch up. I mean, there's so much more money coming in that people are going to either rotate profit or they're just going to buy things that are cheaper, like you saw in the runs. Things are going to catch up, but it doesn't mean Bitcoin is going to going to stop climbing. It might just slow down a little bit, but I don't think it's going to stop.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be along for the ride, but you're right. I mean, it's always good to be liquid. You gotta play it. Got to play it. It's better to play it probably safer than it is to play it more aggressive, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
I'll
go
use
on.
ordinals as a multiplier. I'll definitely use them as a multiplier, but I'm not going to make the same mistake of staying over invested like I did on ETH the last cycle. Like, I mean, I'm still holding a lot of ETH stuff, and we're seeing what's happening there. So if I can hold one or two NFTs and ordinals forever, or maybe one of each that I like, and then just flip the rest, I'll be happy with that. But no way am I making the same mistake. I'm trying not to.
I think that's a really great shout, Jinzo. And I mean, I think it's just an interesting concept that we say stuff like, I'm going to hold this PFP forever. It's like, would you ever hold a picture forever when you can cash out and then turn that into something in the real world, that you could share with your family or just improve your quality of life, whatever it is. I think it's just like this thing of we always have to be in the game. So you definitely don't. Like it's totally a fair perspective to say, hey, Bitcoin's gonna keep ripping and prices will come down, and it's definitely possible. I think on a lot of stuff we will cool down, like these small little derivatives and stuff. I think if Bitcoin melted faces and they were suddenly worth thousands of dollars, you're gonna see everyone race and the floor is gonna brick. But I think a lot of it is that we've seen the prices just kind of stay flat. Like Natcat's definitely dipped, but they're still not like as down bad if you look at it in a USD perspective. So if you choose to, you can always look at it as okay, like this is just the money amount when I got started in US dollars. And if I'm extracting more, I'm going to be happy whether Bitcoin goes up or not. I definitely do recommend having a separate stack of Bitcoin. That's just like, this is my Bitcoin to stay in Bitcoin. So you'll have exposure to it. But there's still ways to trade it, even if Bitcoin goes up. Like, I think just familiarizing yourself with the blue chip collections and their price action is the biggest thing I can recommend. That's how I kind of got started on my ordinal journey. Is I just found, okay, here's the low for puppets. I believe in puppets. I will buy dips. If they keep dipping, I'll keep buying. And we've even seen, Bitcoin briefly went below 70K today. I do think it's going to be a moon mission this year, and I'm sure we'll break 100K at some point. But going back to the comment on, Bored Apes hit $400,000 floor at one point. These things can go crazy, right? At no point did the Bored Apes stop going to 100 ETH just because ETH ripped up the 4K. It didn't really matter because people wanted them. We're definitely not as in a frenzy to buy NFTs as we used to be. I think the volume across all chains for NFTs is still pretty low, but WAF has talked about these catalysts of some of these ancient whales coming into play. I definitely think that's going to happen at some point where they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars because all their Bitcoin has done so well. We're talking of a fraction of one Bitcoin, so it doesn't really matter as much, but these collections are still only a year old and could have that historic significance. So I think there's moves to be made. And I think if you're looking to multiply your Bitcoin, even as Bitcoin goes up, for quick small flips, like puppets at 0.16 is almost always a buy. If you just look at the price chart, it's like 0.16, you could list it right now for 0.18, 8.02, right? You can just do that over and over and over and over again. Like I done that 50 times on puppets, just bought the dip and sold the rip. With quantum cats, they keep going to like 0.27, 0.28. If you have the bankroll for it, just keep buying them and selling them at 0.3. Like you'll make 0.03 Bitcoin every time, and you're just slowly making this Bitcoin generation machine. So I definitely wouldn't stay fully out. Just, play the land, do what works for you.
I
I mean,
think
I
the
don't think you need to
ordinals.
be.
Oh, sorry, Waf. I was going to say, I think ordinals hold so much better and they have so much pumpability. People are still coming in droves. I mean, like you said, you shouldn't stay out at all. You shouldn't stay out. You should still stay involved. It's just be smart about it. And I think this dip is a huge opportunity for people to get back in or to get in if they missed the last run up. I bought a bunch of Nat Cats on this dip and I'm just waiting to unload them as I go up, maybe hold one or two long term. But yeah, I even wish I would have bought one now at 2005. I just got a little bit of a cold feet because I was too invested and I thought maybe they'd go lower. But man, if they keep dipping, I'll keep buying and I'll just keep flipping on the way up. They just have such pumpability in this ecosystem, crazier than ETH even.
I was gonna say you don't need to be all out or all in. You definitely can play it like sort of like in the middle. But if you got significant money on the table and it's life changing, I mean, there's nothing wrong with taking that money, in my opinion. I mean, I think that's if it's that gonna fundamentally change your life, then you should take the money and forget the ordinal, forget the PFP. Like changing your life is more important than being in the game is what I would say.
Yeah, well said. Wow, absolutely. I mean, there's no reason to hold a PFP just to be exposed to it. And you can hold something for a day and let go of it the same day just for a little quick profit if you're trying to get in on it. But definitely, if there's ever a point where you can significantly improve your life, I think you should take that every single time. If you're at the point where a few $1,000s doesn't really make or break your lifestyle or the future trajectory of your life, then I definitely think crypto's a good way to change your life if you can parlay it into some crazy shit in the space, as we've all seen. But absolutely, get yourself out of debt if you're in it. Take care of your family, take care of yourself. Like all that stuff is more important than money at the end of the day. 100%.
Yeah, and then the other thing I would say, like if you got all those things set up and you can afford to kind of play in this game and play it like in a whale status type of position, I think people are going to be making life changing money or like at least life changing amounts of money to play in this game. You got to think about when you do have a big hit, like what's your next move going to be? Because like even in my case, like I was like kind of looking back over the last few weeks of like how I play certain things, and I made a big hit, big move with Nat Cats, but I didn't have like another move lined up. Like in hindsight, I would have loved to kind of like parlay that into like getting into OMBs early, knowing that this mint was coming up and like kind of riding up that floor price as well. So like, I think you got to think about the next play after one play works out to your favor. Like you got to think about sort of like the next steps, and which I don't think I did as good, and that's something I'm going to be working on. Like if I hit something big, I want to be able to like roll that into something else real quick and like kind of have that move figured out, beforehand.
Yeah, I love that laugh. I think that's like just such a blind spot for a lot of traders in the space, like myself included. It's not even just like not having something lined up. It can also be forcing it. Like I think okay not to have something lined up if you don't know. I think where it gets into trouble is like needing to have that next thing, even if there's nothing there. I definitely think after I hit it be well on Nat Cats, I definitely sold out of a lot of them. Um, Ready to buy the dip, which I'm glad I was because I have more than I ever had now because I was able to sell out and rebuy back in. But I was just so anxious sitting on the liquidity where I was like, oh man, like let me get into these Natalias because they could be big. And it just wasn't a home run, no brainer trade. Like I knew going into it, I felt anxious about, I don't know how it's going to play out. And I think I would have done better to just sit and wait for something like you were saying, like knowing there's this OMB mint, waiting for a pullback. Like I would have loved to just save up that liquidity and bought the dip on puppets when they went to 0.14, or the quantum cats dip. Like I would have felt so good about that. But instead went for degen mint because I was just like, I need another play going here. So I definitely think there's nothing wrong with just like sitting back and being patient. And it's so easy to not be patient in this space because there's always a shitcoin that just 1,000x or some project that 10x, and like side of ourselves, there's just something that's like, I need to be in the action. Like I need to be getting this next trade. Other people are doing it. The next one's going to hit. I just need to be on it. But like totally cool to just kick back and not make trades every day. Like I think that's a really big differentiator for some of these mega whales that you see is like, they don't trade for months and then they just dump 100 grand at something and wait and wait for their thesis to play out.
That's completely true. You could definitely overtrade this market. I mean, I think in my case, I don't think I tend to overtrade, but I felt like I didn't think through all the options enough. At least they kind of became clear after the fact. When I look back, I was like, I should have like I missed that. I should have not missed the O and B play, in my opinion. I think that one was kind of like obvious. So that's what I was looking at. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like you don't have to force a move. You could just sit back and like just wait and let a move come to you. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I went off on my own side tangent there. Well, I'm definitely not saying you overtraded by any means. I was more so just making sure that people weren't saying, I got to get involved in something. I need to have something lined up. It's like, it's okay if you don't. But yeah, totally to your point. If you can get something lined up, definitely do your research and like be ready for the next one as well.
Yeah, because like Jinzo said, like he looks at ordinals as a multiplier on Bitcoin. And that's how I'm looking at it too. And like my goal is to basically at the end of the day is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as I can. And I feel like through ordinals is like the way to accomplish that. But then it's a double edged sword when Bitcoin's going up. and ordinals are going down. So you're kind of like you're losing kind of like double in that respect because you're not accumulating more Bitcoin and you're actually like losing Bitcoin. So it's a tough game we play. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been finding myself just stacking Bitcoin in Merlin so I can't blow it on ordinals. It's been a good strategy for me. I can't touch it. It's just out of sight, out of mind. Hopefully getting some of their airdrop. So it's like I'm, still getting that multiplier because I'm getting some extra interest on the money I'm putting away there. And just stacking up some Bitcoin on the side, and then anything left over I can have. Cool. I'm gonna buy my ordinals, hopefully multiply them out, the dips, sell the rips, and just keep rinsing and repeating. So I think that's definitely a good strat.
All right. So on that note, I do have to jump, but like I'll try and hop into chat if there's any questions or anything. I guess Ross, you could close out the show, man. I gotta run.
Wow, always a pleasure, bro. Appreciate you being the dog that you are. Thank you so much for joining on the road, dude. Another great episode as always. Appreciate you, man, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll talk to you next week, bro.
That's good. All right. So with WAF stepping out, I'm just going to address these audience questions here, and then we'll close it out and lock it down. Big shout out to WAF Dog himself. He's an absolute beast and a legend of ordinals. First and foremost, just to shout out what Silva was pointing out in voice chat, we still definitely had some pretty significant NFT volume over the past week. So did not want to imply that there was no volume coming to NFTs. It's just like in comparison to other stuff in the space, it's still low-ish volume in comparison, but it's 100 million worth of volume. So it's certainly not nothing. There's definitely a lot of money floating around in the space. So keep that in mind when you're doing your trading. And then Dive Bars Rules asked how to know when to cut losses, which I think is a really great question. And with this space, you never really know. It all, I think, goes down to thinking about the money objectively as possible. And I think with trading, you really need to keep in mind your emotions and what is your sort of false reality that you have on it. I think it's really easy. Let's say you're down 50% on a position. Let's say hypothetically you lost $5,000. Down 50%, you lost $5,000. You need to ask yourself, is this $5,000 best in the thing that I'm holding, or is it better deployed elsewhere? That is the only question that matters. If it's better elsewhere and you're more confident with that $5,000 elsewhere, cut your loss right then and there and move on. I think we have a tendency emotionally to say, well, I'm down $5,000. I don't want to be down this much. Wait to get back out of it. Maybe it goes up 20%. Then you're thinking, well, now I'm only down 30%. I'm going to wait until I'm back to break even. And then you're just stuck in this vicious cycle of chasing. You're not getting out. You're not selling. Meanwhile, you had this awesome play on your radar that double upped in the time that you were fucking around holding this bag that's dead. So, it's all relative. Like, I don't know what projects you're holding. If you're holding something that you're super convicted in and it dips, probably don't sell it because you have all this conviction. But if at any point in time you're holding something that you can easily sell and not take, like easily just as liquidity, right? Like there's some stuff that's not as easy to sell as other things, but if you can just sell, get out, get the money, and there's a trade that you like better, 100% of the time sell it. There's no reason to hold on to a loss just because psychologically you're down 50% on it. Like just loss and move on. I have been talking about Natalia's this episode. Just cut the loss. I definitely realized I fucked up. It was a big loss. I was like, man, I could have made more. Sold it. They pumped briefly. I could have made more if I sold it, but like the thesis was still there. There was no reason for me to be holding this collection. I didn't believe in it. As soon as that is true, just cut your losses and move on. Like the end of the day, if you're trading JPEGs, if you're trading coins, like you are a trader. You really just got to figure out trader psychology, managing your emotions, and just making the best moves in a vacuum. And it's not a matter of where you were a day ago, what your account balance is. The moment you check it, that is where you're at. You just need to think clear headed and like ignore all the other noise. Definitely check out Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas if you haven't. The whole book is just about that. It's about getting into this trading mindset, not trading with emotions. Like you just have to be a calculated machine of risk reward when you're in here. That's the only way to do it. All right. Well, I got a little rambly this episode, Ep3, aka the Ramble Hours, but we're wrapped up. We're without a waff. This is now just boss show. So feel free if anyone wants to chat. I think we're wrapped on the recording, but